A young man runs through a dark Boston alleyway to escape capture. He retreats into the shadows while a dark sedan waits nearby. A man steps into a local diner, seeking cover from pursuit. He sits at the counter, tense and alert, scanning the surroundings. The young man waits as others around him carry on unaware. Two men exchange a solemn, silent handshake in the dim light. He watches a delivery truck pass while keeping a low profile. A priest swings a censer, clouding the air with thick incense. The man stands in shadow, his face obscured by the darkness. Three figures stand together on a barren, windswept coastal beach. Another man stands alone in a dark, industrial storage warehouse. He stares ahead with a look of cold, calculated detachment. A hand grips a heavy black pistol, fingers tightening around steel. A group of men in athletic gear collide during training. The man turns, flashing a rude gesture to his peers nearby. He walks with purpose through the busy city center streets. Trainees sprint in unison across a large, open, grassy field. An officer adjusts his holster while preparing for the day ahead. Colin Sullivan stares ahead, his features tight with carefully practiced professional discipline. Frank Costello looms in the low light, his eyes sharp with predatory intent. Billy Costigan shifts his weight, the exhaustion of the double life carved into him. He sits beside a hospital bed, the silence thick with unspoken terminal grief. Captain Queenan leans close, his voice a low, steady anchor in the storm. The captain sighs, the weight of his station pulling at his weary face. Sullivan enters the office, adjusting his suit jacket with an arrogant, practiced smoothness. He scans the room, meeting the gaze of his colleagues with cold certainty. A somber group stands at the gravesite, their faces obscured by deep shadows. Costigan lingers behind, his eyes fixed on the cold, unforgiving earth. He reports to his handlers, his posture rigid under their relentless, scrutinizing gaze. Sergeant Dignam barks an order, his expression a mask of pure, unadulterated hostility. Costigan forces his body through punishing push-ups, drowning his thoughts in physical pain. He stands amidst the chaotic prison yard, surrounded by the predatory silence of inmates. His mother turns, her eyes searching his face for a son she barely knows. He relaxes on the porch, nursing a drink while watching the street below. Costigan speaks quickly, his words desperate to maintain the illusion of his cover. Sullivan navigates the rain-slicked city streets, his eyes scanning for an invisible threat. Sullivan pulls the car into a narrow, dimly lit city alleyway. He watches the suspicious vehicle vanish into the thick urban fog. Costigan paces inside the cramped shop, his anxiety radiating like heat. The target enters the store, eyeing the nervous undercover operative intently. They exchange low-voiced threats while leaning against the cluttered wooden counter. Costigan grips the edge of the table, anticipating a sudden confrontation. The mobster strikes, sending goods flying across the small room instantly. Costigan collapses hard into the cooler, his body limp and broken. Later, Sullivan meets his partner at a refined, upscale dinner table. He whispers carefully selected lies to hide his true criminal loyalties. She smiles warmly, unaware of the serpent sitting across from her. Sullivan maintains his composure, sipping wine while measuring her suspicious gaze. They discuss his promotion, a hollow victory built on layered deceit. Elsewhere, Costigan reports to the boss, his hand heavily bandaged. The elder criminal examines the injury, his eyes gleaming with suspicion. He retrieves a hidden burner phone, making a cryptic, urgent call. Costigan watches the older man, preparing to strike when opportunity arises. Both men reach for their weapons as the final endgame begins. Dignam stares at the phone, his face hardening as he processes the dire news. Queenan holds the receiver, his eyes distant as he contemplates the unfolding betrayal. Sullivan pours coffee, his composure masking the growing unease behind his guarded expression. Costigan sits in the dim office, his brow furrowed while he weighs his precarious survival. Sullivan leans forward, his voice low as he subtly probes for hidden tactical vulnerabilities. Costello watches the horse race on his television, his gaze cold and entirely detached. Costello suddenly slumps to the ground, his body giving way under the weight of illness. The associate stares blankly at the scene, unable to comprehend the sudden, chaotic collapse. Sullivan scans the documents, his eyes darting across the pages for any sign of exposure. Sullivan gives a sharp, impatient thumbs up, signaling his team to continue the surveillance sweep. The associate sits in the car, his breathing ragged as he recounts the tragic incident. Sullivan meets with the team, his face a mask of false concern regarding the investigation. Costello gestures wildly, his paranoia flaring as he suspects a leak within his ranks. Costello leans into the shadows, his voice a gravelly whisper demanding total, unquestioning loyalty. A priest and nun sit together at a table, their quiet conversation interrupted by arrivals. A delivery van rolls past the window, its presence drawing a suspicious glance from within. Costello interrogates the man across from him, his eyes boring into the target's soul. The man flinches, his hesitation confirming the deep-seated fears growing in the mob boss. Frank Costello leans into the nervous man, his shadow swallowing the rain-slicked deck. He grips the man's jacket, demanding answers with a guttural, terrifying intensity. Fear flashes across the man's face as he realizes the trap is closing. They descend to the car, the air heavy with unspoken threats and damp misery. The man stares out the window, his eyes glassed over with desperate, hidden calculations. He listens intently, absorbing the lethal instructions whispered in the confined, suffocating space. The driver maintains a stone-faced vigil, eyes scanning the rearview for potential shadows. The passenger taps his fingers, a nervous tick betrayed by his composed, practiced mask. Madeline gestures emphatically, her voice cutting through the clinical silence of the office. She presses for clarity, her hands dancing in the air like trapped birds. The man hunches over the desk, his face contorted in a silent, agonizing plea. Desperation leaks from his pores as he tries to maintain his fragile, false identity. Madeline watches him, her chin resting on her hand, reading the tremors of deceit. He leans back, the harsh fluorescent lights exposing the cracks in his carefully crafted veneer. They walk through the sterile halls, two strangers bound by secrets they cannot share. He hands her a crumpled note, the weight of the confession crushing him instantly. The man clutches his hat, a singular mark of a life lived in constant shadow. He finally exits the terminal, vanishing into the gray anonymity of the bustling crowd. Madeline listens as Billy expresses his desperate exhaustion. He confesses to losing his identity within the deception. She watches him, her expression hardening with realization. He struggles to articulate the weight of his double life. Colin packs his belongings, preparing to vacate his apartment. He shifts boxes while television news plays in the background. Madeline enters the kitchen, her demeanor shifting towards suspicion. Colin playfully reaches for her, masking his internal tension. He retrieves a ringing phone to handle clandestine business. Madeline smiles, though her eyes linger on his movements. Colin steps away, his face darkening during the call. Frank Costello barks orders into his own mobile device. He paces the pier, planning his next tactical maneuver. Colin listens intently, his posture rigid and purely professional. He answers cautiously, maintaining his carefully constructed facade. Colin confirms the details, betraying no sign of weakness. Billy stares at the wall, paralyzed by his situation. Madeline lingers in the doorway, observing him with anxiety. Frank seduces his mistress in the dimly lit bedroom. He runs his face against her skin with possessive intent. Captain Queenan stands in a dusty, sun-drenched industrial site. He speaks to his subordinate about the escalating investigation. Colin Sullivan listens, maintaining a mask of professional stoicism. The captain turns, his brow furrowed by brewing suspicion. Colin forces a thin, nervous smile while adjusting his tie. A man waits by a car, clutching a dark, folded coat. A mobile screen flashes a cryptic command: follow the envelope. Billy Costigan sits in the dark, his expression tight and fearful. He scans the shadows, searching for an unseen, lethal threat. Billy meets with Frank in a dark, hollowed-out theater. The mob boss interrogates his protege with piercing, paranoid intensity. Frank presses the young man for details about the leak. Billy deflects the questioning with a calm, practiced lie. He realizes he is being circled by a predator. Frank brandishes a revolver, forcing Billy to stare death down. The mob boss leaves, ultimately sparing him for now. Costigan sits alone at the dim bar, contemplating his precarious position. He lights a cigarette to mask the intense anxiety gnawing at his nerves. In the station, the sergeant initiates a heated argument with a colleague. The officer retreats into the shadows as the argument reaches a stalemate. Captain Queenan discusses the unfolding operation with a trusted subordinate in his office. Sullivan enters the office, maintaining his composed facade while harboring dark secrets. The captain delivers firm instructions, unaware of the treachery sitting before him. Sullivan exits the room and proceeds through the corridors with calculated purpose. He returns to his desk, monitoring classified digital files for compromising information. Costigan collapses into bed, finding brief respite alongside his partner. The operative wakes in a cold sweat, haunted by his double life. He resumes his vigil at the terminal, searching for the mole's identity. His partner stirs, sensing the growing distance and coldness in his touch. A computer screen displays the faces of potential suspects currently under investigation. Costigan stakes out the criminal headquarters, waiting for a sign of weakness. Inside the dark dark tavern, he confronts the leadership to force a breakthrough. A brutal chase erupts as the target attempts to flee the scene. He cornered his adversary, ending the long, lethal game of deception forever. Billy Costigan argues with an officer inside the crowded station. He drinks alone in a dim, cluttered room. A wounded man gasps for breath while clutching his chest. Billy stares blankly into the cold, oppressive darkness. He paces nervously through the desolate, industrial space. A man speaks urgently into a telephone receiver. A woman reads a document under soft, intimate lighting. Billy sits motionless on a concrete bench at night. She approaches him, her expression filled with profound concern. She embraces him, offering silent comfort during his crisis. Billy lowers his head, burdened by the heavy deception. He walks away, solitary and weighed by his secret. A bloodied phone rests on official police paperwork. Colin Sullivan inspects the recovered evidence with intense focus. Billy chugs whiskey while reviewing files in the shadows. He makes a guarded call, his voice low and tense. Colin listens intently to the voice on the other end. He enters a room, gun drawn, searching for his target. Costigan steps into the warehouse, his pistol raised and trembling. Costello stands near the heavy machinery, clutching his phone in silence. Sullivan emerges from the shadows, his weapon leveled at the mob boss. Blood trickles from Costello's mouth as he stares down his betrayer. Sullivan pulls the trigger, silencing the aging criminal once and for all. He holsters his weapon, glancing around the dark, industrial tomb. Costello slumps against the steel loader, his life force fading rapidly. Madeline receives the grim news, her face hardening behind the glowing lamp. Sullivan leaves his victim behind, walking away into the cold night. The scene shifts to the bustling police headquarters, alive with frantic energy. Sullivan walks past the glass offices, maintaining his stoic professional facade. He enters the office, ready to scrub the digital records clean. The mole sits at the terminal, his fingers hovering over the keys. He types the password, erasing the undercover operative from the system. The screen confirms the deletion, purging the history of the investigation. Sullivan exhales, believing he has finally escaped his checkered past. Madeline listens to the recording, the truth slowly shattering her reality. She grips her arms, staring into the dark, unable to process the betrayal. He grips her arms, staring into the dark, unable to process the betrayal. She shudders, tears tracking through her makeup, pulled into the crushing weight of silence. He releases his hold, turning toward the open doorway, eyes fixed on the horizon. The heavy metal frame looms, casting a long, jagged shadow across the cold floor. A man steps into the dim light, his expression hardening into a mask of steel. He raises his weapon, leveling the barrel with steady, calculated precision at his target. The air vibrates with potential violence as he shifts his stance to block the path. He aims, knuckles whitening under the pressure of a decision that cannot be undone. A sudden movement behind the door fractures the fragile stillness of the hallway. He pivots, finger tightening on the trigger, prepared to eliminate the final obstruction. They stand together in the lift, breathing heavy, faces marked by recent, brutal conflict. Blood trickles down his nose, pooling in the corner of a tight, defiant mouth. The metal doors slide shut, sealing them inside a small, humming box of steel. A loud crack echoes through the corridor as a life ends instantly against the wall. They step over the fallen body, eyes scanning the room for any lingering threats. He marches forward, weapon drawn, stepping over the dark stains spreading on the floor. He pauses to inspect the scene, his demeanor shifting into cold, professional efficiency. He holsters his firearm, glancing once more at the carnage before turning away forever. Blue-clad officers swarm the building, searching every corner for remnants of the failed operation. The solemn line of uniforms stands rigid, honoring those lost to the city's darkness.